just feel so good, good, good. I just feel so good, good, good. I just feel so good.
Okay, so just a quick show of hands. How many of you already have a podcast? And how many of you want to start one or are thinking about it or just want to learn? Right, okay, cool. So I'm a little bit biased. I love podcasts, and you're going to hear that in my talk. But I'm going to tell you why I love podcasts. So first, I want to show of hands again. How many of you have listened to a podcast in the last week? Okay, unanimous. How many of you have listened to a podcast in the last 24 to 48 hours? Okay. Now, I'm about to ask something that might come across as a little inappropriate, but we're all friends here. You may not know me, but you know each other, so don't worry about it, and I'll throw myself under the bus too. How many of you have ever listened to a podcast in some state of undress? In the shower? At the bathroom counter in the morning, doing your hair in your bra? On the toilet? This is the power. This is the power of podcasting. There is an intimacy between the podcast listener and the podcast host that you do not get in other forms of content. So before I talk about what we're going to cover today, I want to let you know that at the end you're going to have the opportunity to download the slides. I'm also going to have a podcast roadmap, sort of A to Z, soup to nuts thing for you that you'll get as well, and a launch checklist. So don't feel like you have to write furious notes, and you'll get all the stuff that's on the slides. So just write down my funny stories and things like that. So what I'm going to talk about today is why podcasts create engaged listeners that know, like, and trust you, this sort of friendship that builds between the podcast host and the listener. I'm going to talk about expertise and authority and how podcasts will support that as well. I'm also going to give you some stats that are really powerful and show you why you definitely need to be podcasting or thinking about it. We're also going to talk about money and how to monetize a podcast. I know I saw some comments already that that's what people want to know. But I want to get this into your head. This is my opinion. It doesn't get classified like this normally. But podcasts to me are not content marketing, okay? They are relationship building. They are networking exercises. They are actually referral marketing on a grand scale, because what's happening with a podcast is you are becoming friends with the listener, and then you're referring them back to you, hopefully. So let me tell you some secrets, because everybody's going to want to know about sponsorships and ads, and I'm going to talk about them. I'm talking about how it works. They may seem like easy money in podcasting. You hear about money flowing to podcasters and big advertisers, and you see people like Joe Rogan, whatever, making millions of dollars off of podcast advertisements. But they're often hard to get. They're definitely difficult to manage. I'm going to share a horror story with you. And they can lead to a dwindling community if you pick the wrong ads and sponsors. You're actually better off sponsoring yourself, talking about what you do, the products that you have. And if you do it right, podcasts are the best form of content for actually building that level of trust that leads to successful monetization. So you guys don't know me. I heard about Mediavine through Julie Diley, if you know her. She and I are friends in Orlando, and she told me that I should submit to speak because bloggers want to hear about podcasting. So a little bit about me. I've worn a lot of hats over the last 20 years. I've been a music educator, been a musician all my life, honestly. I was in a barbershop quartet, as you see there, in high school. I was an artistic planner. I actually have a master's degree in conducting. So that's the guy that stands up in front of the orchestra and waves his arms. I worked with some nonprofits at the Kennedy Center, at the National Cathedral. This is my family here, my lovely wife Erin, my daughter Elena, and my son Joey. In 2008, my daughter Elena was born, and she suffered a brain injury during birth. And that required a lot of flexibility really quickly on our parts. So I started a recording studio to be able to work from home. And I did what I loved. I had always been working and loving the genre a cappella. So this group right here on the bottom, that's Divisi from the University of Oregon. How many of you are familiar with the Pitch Perfect movies? That's the group that the Barton Bellas are based on, okay? I also got to work on NBC's The Sing Off for 4 seasons, working with Ben Folds and Sarah Bareilles and Nick Lachey. That was fun. But during this transition and building my business and the stress around my daughter's birth and all the new things that we had to learn, I discovered podcasts. And podcasts changed me. They changed my worldview. They enlarged my worldview. They allowed me to walk a mile in someone else's shoes where, today it's really hard for people to walk even an inch in someone else's shoes. They get conversations happening. They allow people to share stories and have nuanced conversations. And so I fell in love with podcasts. But what I noticed was they didn't really sound that good. And so I reached out to some podcasters that I loved and I said, hey, I love your show. It's changing my life, but your sound sucks. Please let me help you. And that's how I got started as a podcast producer. Just helping people out, and really quickly it became a full-time job and a full-time business. This is just half of the clients I have right now. Over the last year, I've worked on 2,000 episodes for big brands like Salesforce, the John Maxwell team, OG podcasters like Dr. Ginger Campbell, who has Brain Science. It's been around for 13 years, gets over 100,000 downloads a month. All these podcast clients result in about 500,000 downloads a month from the shows I work on. And I've spoken at several industry conferences. And that's all to say that I'm here to tell you that podcasts are the most powerful tool for building client relationships and growing your business. And we're going to talk about why that happens. So reason number 1, they build relationships with engaged listeners who know, like, and trust you. Okay, you've heard know, like, and trust a lot probably if you've listened to anyone that talks about business and marketing. So here's some stats. The average podcast listener listens to 7 episodes a week. This is the average. 6 hours per week, okay? 95 minutes a day. To put that in perspective, that time is 1,440 15-second YouTube ads, okay? That's a lot of time that you would spend with the podcast listener. They listen at home. They listen in their car. They listen while walking their dogs. They listen at work while working out. They can consume podcasts in a lot more ways than they can consume other content, okay? And what happens is your voice is in their ears, millimeters from their eardrums, okay? Literally. You're sharing stories, and this is primal for human beings. We have been doing this since we were in caves, fleeing wild beasts, okay? We've been sharing stories, we've been talking to each other. So you get that reaction with a podcast listener. They have that connection with you. Anybody ever seen this meme? This is what it's like to listen to podcasts. So that's an advertisement there that the person's sitting next to, sharing it. You listen to podcasts. Do you see what, you feel that way? Okay, so let me tell you a story about one of my clients. Michelle Chalfant here. Michelle is a therapist in Nashville, Tennessee, okay? She doesn't have Joe Rogan type downloads. She doesn't have brand new podcaster type downloads. She has reasonable downloads in the tens of thousands a month. Last winter break, she was taking her family on a trip to Barcelona, Spain, because her son was going there for a semester abroad, okay? And so they were all there. Someone in the family had a headache or something like that. So she went down to the local pharmacy to get some ibuprofen. Walked in the door, and the lady behind the counter said, "Oh my God, you're Michelle Chalfant." And she's like, "What? Excuse me? How do you know me?" "I listen to your podcast. It's totally changed my life. I'm such a better person. I have healthier relationships now, blah, blah, blah." And kept going on and on about all these stories. "How's your son doing? How do you know this about me?" Michelle's freaking out. And she's like, "Well, you told us on the podcast." They were friends. It was a one-sided relationship, but they were still friends in that woman's mind. Yeah. Now, here's the second reason. Once you're friends, you also have the ability to establish your expertise and authority through a podcast. Really quickly, a few episodes, that's a few hours of time with the listener. If you can talk for a few hours about a subject, you're an expert. They know you're an expert. And that friendship that you have with them actually accelerates that. They trust you more than a professor they might be taking a class with, or a YouTube video that they do a search really quickly and they, how to do this, or how to cook this, or whatever. They're going to trust you because you've got that time with them, much faster than a video or a blog. This is another one of my clients here, Mike Kim. Mike Kim is a marketing, personal branding expert, and I'll tell you why I consider him an expert. I met him in 2016 at Podcast Movement, which is a big podcasting industry conference. And he's a really, really tall Asian guy. So he like stands out and you see him, just a cool dude, totally normal. And just like all podcasters, when we're at a podcast conference, oh, what's your podcast? What's your podcast? And we check it and we subscribe because we've got our phones there. And 2 months after that conference, I started listening to his podcast and I was blown away. Now, I'm working with other marketing experts and I'm hearing advice all the time about marketing on the podcast that I'm editing. Mike's advice blew me away, so much so that I immediately joined his mastermind, $500 a month. I went to a workshop because I was so impressed by that. Now here's some stats, and it might seem a little heavy, but stick with me for a second. 62 million Americans listen to podcasts each week now. That's over 50% of Americans are listening to podcasts. And it's growing around the world. Europe is close behind. All the continents are listening to podcasts now. 39% of those listeners are ages 25 to 54. So really desirable age group, right? But here's the big one too. 40% are right behind them, 12 to 24. And on Spotify, those 12 to 24-year-olds are actually splitting their time equally between music and podcasts. Spotify has led to younger people discovering podcasts. 31% have a household income of $100,000 or more a year. 57% have a college degree. 63% have full-time employment, so disposable income. Now here's the two big ones. 74% listen to podcasts to learn new things. Okay, and these are coming from Edison Research's share of ear and the infinite dial studies that they've been doing for over 10 years now. Here's the huge one. 93%, so almost all podcast listeners, listen to more than half or the entire episode. If you have a 30-minute episode, you're guaranteed that most of them are going to listen to 15 minutes. Okay, how long are people watching a 15-minute video? Usually about 2 to 3 minutes, and they skip around, right? Podcast listeners listen. They keep listening. This is Katie Kermitzo. She's another one of my clients. She's a business strategist for women entrepreneurs, women business owners, just like all the business coaches and marketing coaches out there. She has an email list. She has her blog. She has coaching groups. She has a mastermind. She has courses, things like that. But how did she build her audience? Through her podcast. So much so that she now has thousands of women business owners that listen to her stories, listen to her experience, to the point that when she has one person drop out of her mastermind, she fills that hole within a day. When she needs a coaching client, she can send out one email and get 5 people interested back because they trust her. They've built that connection with her. And then here's a cool one too. This is another look into how podcast listeners behave. Think of a podcast as an evergreen content asset. They're not a short-term tactic, okay? You have to keep with it, you have to keep doing it. But the reason to do that is, let me see a show of hands again. How many of you have found a podcast at like episode 30, episode 50, and gone back to episode 1 and listened? Okay, yeah, it's like 75, 80% of you here. I did this with Lou Mongello's WDW radio podcast. I found it at episode 410 and went back to episode 1. That's how big a Disney geek I am, okay? They are an appreciable asset. So if you stick with it, those downloads grow and grow. There's like a sweet spot right at about 6 months, 30 episodes around there, where it just starts to compound. If you show up each week and spend that time with people, it grows and grows and grows. They are not viral. Podcasts do not go viral. You cannot start out with thousands of downloads right out of the gate unless you already have a huge audience to promote it to. That's a long play. You have to stick with it, okay, with a podcast. But if you do, it's a funnel that will deliver a return on your investment for years. And I'll give you an example of this here from Mike. Mike is now at about 207 episodes. I got his email yesterday with those files. Back on episode 41 of the Brand New Podcast, so in 2015, July 2015, he did an episode about some business forms that he uses to help close clients and things like that. There was what was there? There was a testimonial form, there was a questionnaire that he puts consulting clients through before he agrees to have a phone call with them. There was, what was the other one? The sales call script. So what he did with this episode, and this is the post from his site, so the show notes, he put a little link there to purchase it for like $50, these 4 forms. That was almost over 4 years ago now. Still delivers about 3 to 5 purchases a month, $200. That's my electric bill. So if you do that with a podcast listener, you'll keep getting that because they go back and they listen from episode 1 every time they find it. And then finally, and this is kind of what I was talking about in terms of content marketing, it not being content marketing, but more networking, relationship building. They're as effective as most forms of referral and network marketing. So if you do a podcast, you're referring thousands of people at a time or hundreds of people at a time. So you don't have to go to as many conferences. You don't have to go to the local Rotary Club to talk about what you're doing, to meet as many people. You can sit in your pajamas at home, record a podcast, and get that type of bang for your buck. But there's some other benefits to a podcast as well. If you want to be speaking in a podcast every week for 30 minutes will improve your speaking, but it'll also give people an example of your speaking. They know it's edited, but still, if you can talk for 30 minutes, they know that you can speak and they'll hire you to do that. If you maybe don't like doing video, or you don't like that you have to edit video so much and you can see it and it's a big pain, this is an alternative where you can get a long form piece of content out there without doing video. And then it's also a path to a book. If you think you want to write a book, but you don't want to have to go through the process of writing a book, all you need is a really good outline of 15 episodes, 20 episodes of something you're going to talk about, the talking points you're going to do the episodes, transcribe the episodes, give the outline and those transcriptions to a ghostwriter. You've got a book. There are people out there that'll do that for $1,000, $2,000, and do a pretty good job. You may not get a publishing deal out of it, but you've got a book and you can put it up and you can sell it and it's there. So now let's talk about monetization, okay? And like I said from the beginning, I'm going to urge you to sponsor yourself or monetize it with your own products. This is just a look into how I monetize my podcast. I've got downloads, just like Mike, where I sell, hey, here's some templates that you can buy for $25. I've got a LinkedIn learning course that generates about $600 a month in royalties for me. Over 9,000 people have taken it. I've got ebooks. I've got productized services that I talk about all the time on my podcast. And you'll hear me talk about them today. Hey, this is what I do for my clients. Here's some of the things we do. Check it out. Calls to action. I'll just subtly drop it in sometimes during an interview. I have a mastermind. This is really small and you can't see it. I have a resources page, so that's all my affiliate links. All the gear I recommend, all the books I recommend, I just throw them up there to make sure I have that. So let's talk about some of these 12 ways. You've probably heard lots of people on podcasts say, hey, go to this link and download this lead magnet. So that's more like 1 through 9 are really referral type income here. But I also suggest that instead of just having lead magnets that are PDFs and things like that, one of the cool things that podcasters like to do is go on other podcasts as a guest. When you have that opportunity to show up on another podcast, recommend that people go listen to one of your own episodes of your podcast because they're already on their phone. They can hop over and find your podcast right away and start building that relationship with you because, in my opinion, the relationship is way more powerful than that PDF that they're going to download and it's going to sit in their folder and they aren't going to read and it's going to disappear after they download 5 more other things. If you have courses, if you're teaching anything, promote those on your podcast. Books and ebooks, like I said, I promote some of mine, but a podcast is also the path to promoting a book, creating a loyal audience that will actually be your army to promote the book when it comes out. I'll give you an example of this. I have a client, Cindy Wong Brandt, who is a progressive parenting blogger. She got a book deal to write a book around her blog, you know, the stuff she's talking about in her Facebook group and all that sort of stuff. But she decided that about 6 months before the book came out, she would come to me and we would start a podcast called Parenting Forward, which was going to be the name of her book. So for 6 months, she built up an audience that knew that name, knew that there was a book coming, and was willing to promote it, share it, rate and review it when it came out. So this is what she saw on Amazon right away when it started out. You can see number 41 in Christian social issues, 480 in parenting, and that was all from the work she did to promote it on her podcast. She built an audience that trusted her even more so because they were hearing her talk. I already mentioned service packages. So if you do anything that's a productized service that you want to sell, promote those. If you are a coach of any sort, a podcast is a great place to do a live coaching. Bring a potential person on or bring someone you're actually working with and coach them live because it actually showcases your talents. It lets people hear what it would be like to work with you as a coach. Like if you're an experienced blogger and you're coaching bloggers that are just up and coming, you can show them that there. If you have masterminds, this is something that Mike has done, I've done it, Katie Kremitzos has done it as well. You bring your mastermind members onto your show, not only to showcase them, because you want to do that for your mastermind members, but also to let them talk about what it's like to be in a mastermind. Because people hear, like, what the heck is a mastermind? They're not all business gurus that have read Napoleon Hill's book and stuff like that. It gives people the chance to hear what it's like and what are the benefits of a mastermind. If you're consulting at all, this gives you the opportunity to share stories from your consulting journey, case studies. If there's a brand that you really want to work with, invite someone on your podcast to interview them about what they're doing and something good, because it not only starts a relationship and builds rapport, but they feel special. Going on a podcast is kind of like you're a celebrity, right? You know, you got invited. It's this big media thing. Even though you might have 100 people listening to it, it's still pretty cool. But you know, I want to comment a little bit about podcast audiences. I'll share this stat in a little bit, but the average podcast has about 115 downloads per episode, okay? And people are like, wow, that just doesn't seem worth it. I have more traffic than that on my blog, blah, blah, blah. But if 115 people, like this is half of that, showed up at your house once a week to hear you speak, wouldn't that be a big deal? Okay? So yeah, so think about that. Live events, if you're doing any type of live event, you're gonna wanna talk about it on the podcast. You're gonna wanna bring people on. Like if you're doing a virtual summit, bring someone on that's participating in the virtual summit about X topic to talk about what's gonna be covered and what the benefits are. I talked about public speaking already, but on my podcast, I occasionally just drop in there, oh, hey, you know, last week I spoke at the Mediavine Conference in Austin and it was really cool and I saw this there. I guarantee you someone's listening that's gonna need a speaker at some point. And if they know you're speaking in front of crowds bigger than your family, they're gonna wanna hire you, or they might need to hire you at some point. So let's talk a little bit about affiliate relationships. You guys have probably already experienced with this, but it's the same thing with podcasts. Whenever you mention a book, whenever you mention a website, a product, you're gonna want to have an affiliate link for that in your show notes. Because again, 2 years down the road, someone might be listening to that and come back and they're gonna generate that affiliate income. How many of you are on Patreon already or have some type of fan club? No? How many of you know what Patreon is? Okay, cool. So if you want to give people the opportunity just to give you some money because they like what you do, Patreon is a good option for that. If you have 1,000 downloads an episode, don't expect to immediately have 100 people on Patreon supporting you, giving you $5 a month. It doesn't work that way. It's a slower growth thing, and you have to provide access and exclusive content. So I have a good number of clients that do this, and they do things like they take 20 minutes out of their podcast interview that they did that was an hour and put it up for the Patreon people, or they shoot a special video for them, things like that. So, sponsors and ads. And there's going to be time at the end for questions, so we'll get there in a second. So let's talk about sponsors and ads. So these are the stats that show you why it's a good idea, okay? 65%, so this is a Nielsen survey from about a year and a half ago. 65% said podcast ads increase their purchase intent. 54% said they're more likely to consider a brand after hearing a podcast ad. How many of you have bought something because you heard a podcast ad? I'm wearing Native deodorant right now because of that. Because I heard it so much, and I'm like, oh yeah, that natural stuff, that sounds like a good idea. These are two big ones though. 57% of podcast ads outperform video pre-rolls for intent to purchase. What's the most pressed button on the internet? Skip ad, right? Podcast listeners listen to the ads. Joe Rogan does like 5 to 6 minutes of ads at the beginning of his episode. I can't tell you how often I find myself actually listening to them because he's funny when he reads them sometimes. They want to hear what you have to say, and then they trust you already. So they're like, well, I'll check that out because I know it's helping so-and-so podcast host, but you wouldn't talk about it if you weren't using it or believing in it, okay? So let's talk a little bit about how it works and why it's not the great, amazing thing that a lot of people will say it is. Remember what I said, the average podcast host has about 115 downloads per episode? Not until you get to the top 20% of all podcasts do you reach 1,000 to 2,000 downloads per episode. That's what DPE is. And that equals about $10 to $50 for a 30-second mid-roll ad. So you do a 30-second mid-roll ad on a weekly show, that's about $200 a month, if you got a really good advertiser, okay? But once you get higher downloads, this can be a really good idea. If you do that though, you need to think about an agency. You need a representative to help you with this. There's agencies out there like True Native Media. There's a large agency, AdvertiseCast, where they're working with the brands to get the right sponsor to use. So you can say, hey, I have a show about eco-wellness, okay? These are the brands that I'm willing to work with, and they'll find stuff for you like that. But prepare for hoops. So this is the horror story. I had a client who was working with a big bank to do a sort of branded episode. So this would be like where there's an ad in the episode to talk about a certain product that this bank had. And then the content of the episode is around that, like why you should be using this type of product for your business. So after we recorded the first episode, this was for 2 episodes, it took about 6 to 8 weeks to get the first comments back. So go back to Jamie's talk yesterday about dealing with brands. 6 to 8 weeks. And then we did the corrections, and then it was another 2 to 3 months after that before we could air the episode and got approval from their legal department. Okay, so we got the first episode out, started working getting the second episode done. Same process. By the time we got the first draft, like corrections back, the brand said, oh, you know what, we're not promoting that anymore. Here's your money, just don't worry about it, but you need to take mention of us out of the episode. So we still got the money, but it was like almost a year process of trying to get it done and dealing with it. You're actually better off finding sponsors that fit well with your community. So I keep using Katie as an example. I actually started out my relationship with her as an advertiser on her show. I knew that she had women business owners that would benefit from having a podcast. So I went to her and said, hey, I'd like to advertise on your show. We worked out some creative idea where for 8 weeks, I went on for like 2 minutes and gave audio tips. So like, hey, you're starting out a podcast, here's how you can sound better. And that led to some clients, and that led to her liking what I had to say and building a relationship and becoming a client with me. So it actually worked out better because we were working with each other and we could understand each other. So if you can find that, like if you're working with certain brands or local businesses that you can partner with, you actually might be able to get $500 a month to do a 30-second or 60-second mid-roll ad because they know, hey, your 150 people that you're talking to each week, those are my people. Those are the ones I want coming into my store, okay? So think about it that way as well. A lot of these ideas you could put in place tomorrow if you already have a podcast because it's as simple as doing a call to action during your outro or something like that. So think about it. I want to share a couple more strategies that I think a lot of people are missing in the podcasting world so that when you guys go out there and you start your podcast, you can try this and actually get ahead of a lot of people. The first is repurposing. And this is the really powerful idea even for bloggers and anyone that's creating content, is to start with a podcast and then repurpose it into a million different things. And this is the strategy that I use with my clients. So if you're already doing live video, Facebook Live, Instagram Live, LinkedIn Live, does Pinterest have live yet? I don't know. Do a live video and structure it, have your talking points, know what you're going to talk about. Pull the audio from that live video and then edit it down into a podcast. And then here's where the magic starts to happen. You transcribe that audio and you can create blogs from that, blog articles. We do this for our clients where 8 days after the podcast episode airs, we post a blog that's from a part of that episode. It's nicely formatted. Google likes it and it helps with SEO. We also create a PDF key takeaways document so that when people listen to the episode, they don't have to go back and re-listen to the episode to remember what was said and get the key points. And the cool thing about it is that you get their email address when they download it. So it's an opt-in. Take the transcript, grab some quotes from it or some clips. Have you seen audiograms? Those are the podcast artwork and you see the waveform going. That's a great way to tease some things and create other pieces of content. You can use quotes and things like that as an Alexa daily briefing. You can create Alexa skills for your podcast so people don't have to try and find it in TuneIn Radio's skill. Can get kind of frustrating. You can create graphics, quote cards, memes from all of that content that you've spoken already. And then, so put that up on Instagram, put that up on Twitter, come back 3 weeks later and figure out, okay, what was the most popular quote? And then shoot a 2-minute ranty video to put up on YouTube talking about that, okay? All these pieces of content came from a 30 to 45-minute podcast recording on camera, okay? This is a great strategy. It's a powerful strategy. It's a way that you can use virtual assistants to help. It's a way you can use copywriters, content writers to help you create more content that helps with your SEO and improves you in search results. There are other ways. So already, like my preferred podcast hosting platform is Libsyn. Libsyn, I can auto-publish to YouTube, okay? So I can publish the episode, and people are like, well, that's kind of annoying. It's not really a video, and it's just, you know, static image. YouTube is a huge search engine, right? So if someone's searching for a topic that you covered on a podcast episode, they might find it there. And they might listen to it there, or they might go over to their podcast app and check it out because you're providing a lot more content than the average YouTube video creator, right? Okay. Other tools like repurpose.io. This is one where, you know, if you create an RSS feed with your podcast, it'll automatically publish to Facebook, it'll automatically publish to YouTube, SoundCloud, Instagram, all sorts of things like that, Facebook Live. Another idea in terms of repurposing old podcasts is you can pull them down. Like if you've done 100 episodes, you could pull down the first 30, transcribe them, turn them into an info product, and then sell them. And warn people, say, oh, you know, hey, I want people to be able to find stuff, or I'm rehashing some of this stuff. I'm going to pull these down and turn them into a nice book if you'd like to buy it. You'd be surprised. People that listen to all 30 of those episodes will still buy it, okay? Because they trust you and they're like, oh, this would be really helpful for me, right? Strategy number 2, hyper-local content. So you've heard of riches are in the niches. This is that idea, especially for those of you that are food bloggers, travel bloggers. Right now, if people want to find out something about their local area, it's Yelp and Google, right? And Yelp sucks. It's hilarious. You know, the reviews that are on there. The local newspaper that used to do this stuff, the local TV news channel that does maybe one story and then the rest are like crazy, somebody that did this crime here on this street, that sort of thing. They can't get that anymore. And with people moving into local areas and being more transient now, they need to know. They don't know about the area. They didn't grow up there. I'll give you some examples of this. This is my friend Mark Bologna. Mark was a software engineer, or is a software engineer. He's getting ready to leave that. In New Orleans, grew up there, loved New Orleans. He was getting frustrated with all the content about New Orleans being about Mardi Gras, Bourbon Street, the Saints, and stuff like that, okay? So he created a podcast where he is telling all those stories about the history and the interesting things and cocktail tours and just crazy stuff about New Orleans. 500,000 downloads in less than 2 years, so about 100 episodes at this point. He actually has gotten a publishing deal from a major travel publisher to write an insider's guide to New Orleans based on his podcast. And he's not a writer, he's not a travel blogger. He just wanted to do a podcast where he talked about people that he loved. You might say, okay, New Orleans, that's an easy topic. Oh, 500,000 downloads, you get that really quickly if you're talking about New Orleans. This is the Ponchatoula podcast. So it also happens to be in Louisiana. I don't know why they're both in Louisiana. They actually are friends. This is Parker Larison, and that's his family. Parker is a personal injury attorney and wanted to create a podcast to get business, get leads from a podcast, but he realized that a personal injury attorney law podcast would be pretty damn boring, right? So what he decided to do for this town that has 10,000 people in it, it's a bedroom community of New Orleans and Baton Rouge. It's about halfway in between. He decided to become the digital mayor of Ponchatoula to talk about the town. So he's done things like he interviewed the principal at the high school, the one high school in town that had just retired after 25 years. He interviewed the star linebacker from the high school that went on to LSU, and if you know Louisiana, LSU is everything, the LSU football too. He was a star at LSU and then came back and started a nonprofit for underserved and marginalized communities in the area. He does restaurant reviews. He talks to local businesses that he's used forever, people that he grew up with, to promote it. There's nothing that goes on in this town. The only thing that's here, you see the strawberries, is the Louisiana Strawberry Festival is there once a year. There's only 10,000 people in the town. In the first week that the podcast was up, 1,000 Facebook group members. Because people wanted it, they needed it, they had nothing else. And they were like, all of a sudden, all the new people that had come to town that were commuting into New Orleans, they wanted to know about Ponchatoula, and they now had an opportunity. This is the power of podcasting. This is, like I said, it's not content marketing. It's about building relationships. It's about networking. Podcasts can change the world. They can change the conversation. That's why I do it. Like I said, it's so hard right now in our country and around the world for people to walk an inch in someone else's shoes, let alone a mile. Podcasts are the way we can change that. And if you happen to have a business, they can be referral marketing as well and help drive your business that way. So if you want to get the slides and that podcast roadmap and a launch checklist, go to emeraldcitypro.com/mvcon19. I'd love it for you to check out my podcast as well. Podcast Strategies is what it's called. But there's so many podcasts about how to podcast. Just search my name, Danny Ozment. I hope that you all will all consider starting a podcast and getting out there and changing the conversation and helping people connect with each other. Thank you. So I think we have plenty of time for questions. Okay, let's start here in front.
I know nothing about podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a writer, and I'm a writer from a long time, 35 years.
Sure.
I came here because my son asked me to come, so
It's a good boy you got there.
He's all over the place. But anyway, when you do a podcast, do you have to have a subject, a place to go? Is there miscellaneous? I mean, because you're talking about people with a particular thing that they're talking about, a subject. Can you start with one subject and move around?
You certainly can, but just like a blog, it's good to have an idea of what you want to talk about and the ideal listener that you want to reach. And if you grab that roadmap, I talk a lot about the how-to in there, like how to get a title that people are going to find, where they're going to find it, how to structure episodes to make sure that people are interested and stay interested. But yes, it's good to stay focused on one topic because I like to say, there's a podcast about everything. You'd be surprised that some of the people that are making 6 figures a year off of a podcast that has 500 downloads a month because they serve a community that didn't have content anywhere else. So if you can find that thing that you can speak to that no one else is speaking to or that you can speak to in a certain way, you build that audience up. You build that audience up. Yeah.
It kind of relates to my question, which
Sure.
is I have a blog all about gray hair, so it's very niched down.
Mm-hmm.
And people keep asking me to do a podcast because I engage with them, they like it.
Yeah.
I think between doing the blog about gray hair and a podcast, I think I would start to actually get overwhelmed just talking about the same thing all the time. So then is it possible to also broaden it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, so, okay, I'll talk about the other things my community's interested in, but
Mhm.
still kind of relates back to that.
You could totally do that. Just like, so the question was, if you already have a blog that's about one topic, would it get redundant or would it be too much to talk about the same thing on a podcast? Yes, but also no. The thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the people that read blogs don't necessarily listen to podcasts. The people that listen to podcasts aren't necessarily reading blogs. So they're different audiences that you can actually reach. The people that are on YouTube are not necessarily the people that are listening to a podcast because the podcast listener is the person that's commuting, is the person that, barely has time at home to do anything else, especially if they have a family or something like that. So you can reach other people through a podcast. Other questions? I'll make my way back.
Okay, what about your equipment? Like, or do you have tips, like if you want to do this, like what's the best sound
Yes.
I get if I do it?
On the roadmap, it gives you exactly, here are the things that I would buy. I will give you a quick one. The mic that you need to have, and some of you may already have it if you're doing videos, is called the Audio-Technica ATR 2100. That is a mic that is very flexible, very inexpensive, flexible. It's USB, and it also has an XLR cable that allows it to connect to a Zoom H4 portable recorder, things like that. But it's just really great. It's about $70, $65 on Amazon. Do not get the Blue Yeti. If you have a Blue Yeti, throw it out the window. It's a great mic if you have a recording studio that is a treated room. And I do talk on that roadmap a little bit about the type of room that you need to record in. This would not necessarily be the best type of room to record in, but if you have an ATR 2100, because of the type of mic that it is, you could actually record an interview in this room, like if you had 2 of them, things like that. Let's go over here.
So we've tried podcasting off and on, I guess, for a year and a half.
Okay.
And we've not been consistent, so I know that's a problem. But we struggle with, I feel like it needs to be so educational, because I'm the one that usually comes up with blog content, 5 tips to get help.
Okay.
But people like our interaction. That's usually our charm. So
Yes.
I'm like, no,
People
we need
know
to
us
show.
to walk in somewhere.
I mean, anybody can learn anything.
Yeah. You can do both if you structure it. Like I tell a lot of people that are doing a podcast, they'll start out and it'll be all them, just all the time. A good balance for any podcaster is to do something like 2 episodes a month where you interview other people. Because the beauty of building the relationship is also bringing on other experts so that people realize, oh, you actually know what you're talking about because they're saying similar things. You do a couple of solo episodes. The other great thing about a podcast that is harder to do in a blog is audience engagement. You can answer listener emails. You can bring audience members on the live coaching. You know, you can bring them on and talk about something that's going on with them. So if you mix it up, but one thing you said, the consistency, that is key. If you commit to doing a weekly show, you have to keep doing a weekly show, okay? If you commit to doing a twice monthly show, you gotta stick with it. Because if you train people that you're gonna be there, and then all of a sudden you don't show up for 3 weeks, they unsubscribe and they move on because they're listening to 6 hours a week. How are they gonna keep up with your show if you disappear? Podcast listeners will actually unsubscribe from shows if they get behind too, because they feel bad that they're not listening to your show. They're like, oh, I'm not supporting them anymore. I'm gonna subscribe, I'll never catch up. So you have to find that perfect balance. Yes, actually you were first here.
We have a podcast, it's Vacation Mavens, and it's travel oriented, so we've thought about Patreon a little bit, but we don't know what we would offer as the extra whatever without doing a lot of extra work, because already we're juggling individual vlogs and then we have Vacation Mavens.
And that's the key with Patreon, is to figure out how you can do something without having to mail 1,000 t-shirts, okay, as your benefits. So that's why I say access, like a monthly video call on Zoom where 100 people could jump on and they can't actually talk to you, but you can answer their questions. Exclusive content. Like if they give you $1 a month, you have my undying gratitude forever. That's a great benefit. But you can do that because they realize you don't want to get stuck mailing 100,000 stickers to somebody because, you know, they gave you $50 a month or something like that. Yes. I think, is it a lunch after this? Okay. Oh, there's another session, so last question.
Can you batch record?
Yes.
Like, is that?
That's a great way to do it.
And my second part to that is like, if you are a blogger, can you take that? Can you read posts? Read the or take a.
Yes. So batching is good for any type of content creation. I'm a big advocate of that. That saves a lot of time because especially if you're a person that needs to focus, sitting down for 3 hours and recording 3 episodes is a great way to do that. If you are going to read a script, which basically a post amounts to, I would get in the habit of freestyling a little bit, like adding things in, adding stories and stuff like that, because people can tell when you're reading. Even if you're really good at acting and reading something, they can tell. And then you lose those authenticity points, okay? So that's a very good idea. I appreciate your time, guys. I will be here the rest of the day, tomorrow, tonight, whatever. So if you have any other questions, feel free to find me, and I'd be happy to help you out.
Thank you.
Thank you.